When my parents came here from Dominica in the Caribbean, like so many others in the 50s and 60s, they weren't necessarily greeted with open arms and warmth, rather closed doors and cold. Mind you, they had one or two things on their side. One, they were invited by the British government, and two, they had something Britain needed, a workforce. As the new arrivals found their place in society, some attitudes appear to have lingered.
I think people are very, very fed up with it, and that we don't look after our own people, let alone looking after other countries.
Some people think that there's some that work hard and that there's others that abuse the systems that we have here.
But I think we should actually look at why they're here and the problems that they faced.
As an immigrant from Canada, I think people don't realise there's a lot more people from Canada, Australia, America than there are asylum seekers.
Well, I think any reasonable thinking person, if they do any research, is for asylum seeking.
I think that people think that they're after a free ride, or they shouldn't be coming to the country because it's not their country.
When asylum seekers come here, they get treated differently from people who are born in this country, and I think that that is also seen as unfair as well.
People tend to think that they're just looking for free money and things like that, and they don't always understand the complexity of the situation and what they're trying to escape from.
I think it all depends on what area of Bristol they're from. Like a lot of the Knoll West, South Mead, the outer surrounding areas, they really don't like them and they hate them. But people with a bit more culture that live closer to the city centre, they don't mind them.
They're not talking about my parents' generation, rather the thousands of people who flee their homeland, wherever that may be, to find safe sanctuary right here. Over the next 2 days, I want to explore the attitudes towards refugees and asylum seekers. I'm asking myself whether the myths that seem to have embedded themselves into mainstream society are there to stay. And I'm realising that more and more people are wanting to know the real story. This is my truth about asylum.
Vietnam.
The unimaginable suffering that asylum seekers say they've had to endure is compounded by myths that morph into our consciousness. And then there's the Home Office bureaucracy that appears to deliberately make life more difficult for people, to detention and then destitution. From unwanted attention because you're different, to unwanted attention because society can be indifferent. Asylum seekers say they're constantly watching their backs, waiting for that knock on the door and living in fear of being detained and deported. It's no wonder many say they feel like living ghosts.
Because when the Home Office says no to you, you have no alternative.
I'm a doctor of medicine. I have been for 10 years. I would like to contribute to life here, but I'm not allowed.
Is some people ignore you, reject you, and see you as a rubbish person.
I don't want benefits. I want to be independent. I can't work because the law won't let me. And I am not entitled to anything. I am destitute.
If I go home, they will kill me.
Sounds harrowing, doesn't it? Imagine that was you. I know we all have our problems, don't we? But imagine for a moment that was you. I gained the trust of two people who don't have to imagine. In fact, they're trying to forget the horrors they faced. Their stories aren't unique. Hassan fled from Somalia. He says he was shot by extremist group Al-Shabaab. His father too was shot and killed in front of him for being a Christian and refusing to denounce his faith. He picks up the story when a group of them came to their door.
Open door. Why? Open door now. Why open? And my dad and door open. My dad and go. My dad skin this one here. My dad died.
They shot your dad?
Yes. Me in the window go and problem in the kidney.
So you jumped out the window?
Yes, and jumped out window, in the walk.
Yes.
And go and hospital.
John Patrick escaped from the Horn of Africa 12 years ago. A business executive and qualified electrician brutally persecuted because of his political beliefs. He was used to travelling all over the world with his work, but he says challenging the political status quo brought him to a treacherous existence. Somehow he managed to escape the continuous torture, and his life was about to twist out of recognition.
When you start getting all these threats, sometimes somebody would put a note through your door, to say if you're not careful, this is what's going to happen to you. We will strip a member of your family and do whatever we do in front of you. We can do that, we will do that. We might come for your head next time, and all these things. And eventually, it had to get to a point whereby it felt you're not safe at all.
So you received these threats. Did you believe those threats?
Oh yes. Before you know it, a lot of things had gone through, including some assassination attempts and things like that. So it's not just saying, it's the reality, and did happen in one occasion actually with myself and my friend meeting out for a business meeting in the evening, and a vehicle then just being sprayed with bullets.
Hassan hasn't seen his mother for 10 years, but he lives in hope.
Hassan one day and my mom, wow, Hassan died, not dead, mom.
So you feel happy?
Happy.
She's away from Somalia?
From Somalia, in the home, no problem, mom.
And she's safe?
Yes, everything is in the telephone.
Although seemingly desensitized about the shootings, this experience has clearly left its mark on Hassan. He used to work in security at Mogadishu Airport, a responsible position. It's unlikely he'll be given that kind of responsibility again. The trauma he says he's been through, both in Somalia and here, has taken its toll. Although he doesn't want to be seen as a victim, he'll tell you his life has moved on. He's grateful for being in Bristol and finding solace with this drop-in centre called Borderlands. He's able to volunteer and be an active member. Hilary Jones is CEO.
One of the nicest quotes that I've ever had was from one of our volunteers, and she said that in the midst of sadness, people can still find great joy here by coming to our drop-in. Isn't that a beautiful thing to say? Isn't that the nicest thing anybody ever said? Because these people's lives are so wrecked, and when they come to us they are very broken, and we can give them a place where they have safety, where they have support, where they're recognised as human beings and they're valued and they're treated as worthwhile. And that's worth so much more than just money, isn't it? It's worth everything to be treated with dignity and respect.
Hassan is no longer an asylum seeker, he's a refugee, which means he now has his legal papers, so he's legally entitled to be here. He's one of the lucky ones, and happy now and moving on with his life. It appears that doesn't mean that other people in a similar situation are no longer persecuted. It seems in many cases you're damned if you are, and you're damned if you're not.
But if their appeal, their application for asylum status is turned down, for refugee status is turned down, then they'll lose that and they'll be evicted and they will get no money at all. And so from that point onwards, they are homeless and they are destitute.
What we want is asylum seekers and refugees, instead of making them destitute, to be given a chance to be able to contribute in their skilled areas of life. And I'm sure that is quite possible.
Depression is really common amongst the members, amongst the people who come to the drop-in, because they've gone through normally quite horrendous experiences that most of us wouldn't even dream of. And then when they get here, they are met with this complete skepticism of their case. If they can be persuasive enough that they manage to get permission to stay and have their asylum case assessed, they may then have to wait long periods of time with absolutely nothing happening and no information at all.
John Patrick may look well, but that's only skin deep. Having to pay for healthcare when the system doesn't allow you to work to pay for it, or needing to see a doctor, he says, is a stress in itself.
You know, having spoken to my doctor, for the GP for many years, I struggled to even try and bring some of the information out. Yeah. But I was then diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, but the underlying issues might probably never have been picked up because the information has been, I've held a lot of information.
45% of our users, of our members, have no income source whatsoever. They are homeless and they aren't destitute. They are entirely reliant on charities to support them. They won't eat unless a charity gives them help. They won't have anywhere to sleep unless somebody gives them some help.
As the picture grows, the system appears even more confused and complicated. And the stories are more compelling. Refugees flee from trauma and arrive to trauma. They're not allowed to work, yet one man says he's been waiting 17 years to have his case heard. And then there's that whole debate about detention centres. John Patrick picks up his heartbreaking story after the break.